Tay, good morning. I do not see you.
Yes, sir.
Hi, good morning.
Oh, good morning. Yes. Welcome. Welcome. So now I'm going to leave it open for both Tay and Fernando to give us their remarks and to open up the festival. And as soon as they complete their wonderful expressions of love for us, then we'll start our Dharma festival. Fernando, Tay?
Hi, good morning.
Tay, do you want to say a few words first?
Tay, can you hear Fernando?
Oh, yes. Yeah, thank you. So good morning, everybody. It's very glad to hear from all of you. And today we will start the Dharma Festival although the coronavirus, but thanks to the technology, we still have the chance to be with each other. That is great. Thank you for Elena and
Greg?
And Fred that have to set up this meeting. Thank you.
Okay, welcome everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
So I just prepared a little prayer for the Dharma Teacher Order. In these days of so much apprehension, so much national and personal spiritual turbulence, may we be teachers of peace, love, and understanding. May we be good listeners, calm, kind anchors for our community and society. May this be our best teaching, our willingness to understand, willingness to think with a non-dual attitude, willingness to love. May we be beacons of peace and be able to provide bridges between groups that are feeling hurt, alienated, disenfranchised, disrespected. May we realize that a teacher never stops learning. Which leads us to the Dharma Festival. As you'll know, it's a forum for our students and teachers to enrich their acquaintance with the Dharma. This is a festival as we celebrate members of our Sanghas who are going to share their thoughts, perspectives, and practices. It is with great joy and anticipation that I'm looking forward to participate in this wonderful occasion. And again, I want to underline, again, thanks to Elena and Craig for their leadership in getting us together. It's so great to see all members of the National Sangha together.
Thank you, Tay. Thank you, Fernando. And I would like to just remark that each presenter will have 5 minutes to present. Craig, do you have the 1 minute warning able to be flashed?
Yeah, we didn't have a chance to see it, but I mean it's somewhat jarring. It looks like that. Is that okay or?
Yeah. So when you see that, that indicates that you have 1 minute left. At the end of the at the 5th minute, the 58th second of the 4th minute, I will ring the bell, so that you know that your time is up as a presenter. Then everyone will have an opportunity to ask questions, to give feedback, to make remarks to our brothers and sisters, and always with the mind of compassion and loving kindness and understanding, and with the spirit of learning and growing in the Dharma. That will be a 5-minute period as well, and it will be again in the 4th minute. We will warn you it's the 4th minute, and at the 5th minute I will ring the bell to indicate that that person's turn is completed, and then the next person will take off. Okay, thank you. So here we start. I am not going to announce the presenters' names. The presenters themselves should announce themselves, because you know on the list where you are. So please unmute yourselves. The presenter only, please unmute themselves. Everyone else, only if you're going to ask questions, you unmute. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm John from the Texas Sangha. I've been with the DTO for several years now, and I've been practicing Buddhism probably for, I think by now, about 15 years. During that 15 years, I meditate a lot. It's starting out about a couple of hours a week, and then it gradually increasing to a couple of days a week. And in the last 5 years, I have consistently doing 1 hour meditation every day. I didn't realize what profound effect it has made on me until like recent events, and you have a chance to reassess your feeling, your thoughts, and you realize that with all those practices, you're not really aware that somehow you got pulled towards the middle way. So in Buddhism, meditation practice is a very essential part of the whole Buddhism learning. It's mentioned in the Eightfold Path, it mentioned in the 5 powers, it mentioned in the 7 links to enlightenment. So it's important. Let me share my experience after those years of meditation. Is 1 hour of meditation was 3 hours of sleep. So even those days that I was very busy with work, with like 3 hours of sleep a day and 1 hour meditation, I totally recharged for the next day. Another side benefits of that is that because your mind is very calm, when you sleep, you really have a deep sleep, and that recovers you a lot. So my 3 hours of sleep is more equivalent like a 5 hours of normal sleep. I think partially of my inheritance background, I was from an Asian background where your life is more on the spiritual side because there's not much material that you can play with in those days in Asia. So moving here to the state is where the focus is more on material size, and somehow that balance out. So that kind of pulled me into the middle path. Another thing is in the first like 20 years of my life, I'm totally into science. I thought that science was the one that can explain everything. But then one day during meditation, it's like there's a flash of wisdom. The flash is like you were in the dark room, and that flash allows you to see things. And I realized that even with meditation, it pulls you, you'll be able to see the flaws itself in science. The base foundation is actually based on experience, not anything that's proven. So the last thing that I know is that in the past 20 years, I've taken the personality test, and two of the personality was like way out of scale. And recently, when my daughter took my psychology class, she asked me to take that test again. So I already know my scores on those, but I will have to take it anyway. But then I was surprised that everything pulls down to pretty much the middle. So just want to share that experience with all of you.
Any questions for our brother John?
Here's Kyle. I have a question.
Sure.
John, you said you were practicing for the last 15 years or so, but what really brought you back to it? Was it just you wanted to try something different? Because I know when we've spoke, you're very scientific minded. So I'm very interested what would make you go back or like to want to rediscover or discover Buddhism again.
So basically, that was an incident where my wife's aunt, back then she was very interested in Tibetan Buddhism. So she invited a Tibetan monk to teach the Dharma and meditation. So she asked me and myself to come along. So I kind of interested in listening. So after a few sessions of listening, I see that the foundation of Buddhism is very scientific. So that triggers me to do research more on all the scriptures and all the teachings. And I start, practicing meditation back then. And then the flash of, I say that the flash of wisdom during one of the meditation sessions is that I see deep down in science the basic foundations based on a handful of things called postulates, and those are not proven. Those are based on experience, just like for example, the Newton's law. Those are based on experience. Those are not proven. So even science itself, the foundation is based on experience. So that convinced me to study more and spend more time in meditation.
This is Dave. Not exactly a question, but I just want to say thank you, John, for sharing that aspect. And I'm just thinking about, in my own experience, the things that I experience by being present through meditation or mindfulness end up being, I don't want to say more profound. That's not the kind of word I'm looking for here, but just that the experiential level is so much different from the abstract level of maybe having read something and studied a text and tried to memorize something or something like that, which is great. I'm not saying that's not a good good thing to do, because it can be, but it has to go beyond just that conceptual level and go more to that experiential level. So I really appreciate you sharing that, especially that last point that you made, because I tend to be very scientifically minded as well. And what you were just saying about Newton, and that those things are not actually proven, that those are experiential. I really appreciate that. So thank you. Dave out.
Excuse me, John. This is Jeff. Thank you for sharing. I'm curious, as you know, as my own meditation practice is progressing, and actually that's somewhat what I will share about. I'm curious what method you follow, or just a little bit about what you do in your mind when you are doing your 1 hour daily meditation.
Well, before the incident with the Tibetan monk, I have attended meditation session at some of the temple around the area. In America, mostly we're teaching about Vipassana, the insight meditation. I tried that, and that somehow doesn't seem to work out for me. Studying with the Tibetan monk, because most Tibetans are doing Samatha meditation, which is the absorbed concentration, and that somehow tuned with me more. So when you practice Samatha meditation, basically you focus on an object like a statue or something. So what I did is I focused on the lotus petal underneath the where the Avalokiteshvara is sitting on that lotus petal. So I focus on that. It's kind of a green jade light. So that somehow really calmed my mind and let me able to concentrate.
Thank you, John.
Hi, I guess I'm next. Let me give you some background. Last year in November, I was promoted to a supervisory position at my clinic, or at a different clinic. And in December, I went to Virginia Beach, and the Is It So monk, the story about Is It So and equanimity was talked about. I came back from that, and in the first week of January, my then new supervisor, my new boss, said, well, you don't fit, and we're going to demote you. And so during all this process of being demoted, the human resources person said, wow, you're really showing a lot of equanimity in this. And I'm like, yeah, I know what that is, it is not being attached to that title, that greed, that, that money, that, it really is just having to be able to calm, to face these things with a calm mind. The problem I found was that I was still going back to those anger and fear and frustration and man, I had all sorts of stuff to go to do this, and what I obviously having been a practitioner, I know that, okay, you go, you let those feelings and those emotions arise, and then because nothing is permanent, they dissipate, and you can acknowledge, yeah, I was frightened, I was fearful, I was angry, but I don't stay there, you know, and that's part of what the meditation and knowing and reading the sutras do. But I also know that one of the things that we should do is give metta, you know, to ourselves, to others, to our teachers, to our even our enemies. And that kind of frustrated me, because I was like, I don't think if I went up and said, hey, to this boss, and to, I also, by the way, I found out that who she replaced me with was one of her best friends. So I said, well, you know, if I go up to these people and say, hey, I give you loving kindness, that may not go over well. And so what I did is I did some research on that, and I read the Simile of the Saw, and the Sutta, the Simile of the Saw, and I also I found out that in Pali, metta is actually more associated with friend or friendship, and so I decided that that's what I can do. I can show them friendship and goodwill. One of the things, though, I realized when I was chanting the metta, that it's not. I can wish them happiness, I can wish them goodwill, but I don't have to make their goodwill happen. I don't have to make their happiness happen. So at that point, I realized that I am just, it's on to them. It's on to them to whether to do the good things that cause less suffering, or to do or if they continue to do bad things that have them have bad karma. And it's also part of mine journey, my practice, that I need to know, apologize if I have done wrong, and if it's useful, and to be able to go, I'm trying to be good. I'm trying to do this the best way I can, and that's okay.
Questions, comments for Richard? Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
This is Jean-Bang Yin. This is comments on and some additional information that I noticed that when you practice and you be able, and I think all of these practice somehow pull you into the middle way area. So when you are fairly in the middle, or you are easy to adapt and swing back and forth between the two sides of the middle. So it makes you more adaptable and being more be able to have compassion or sharing metta with people around you. So if you're aware that you are kind of to one of the extreme, I think we need to do awareness meditations and trying to pull you back to the middle. So that's where you be able to adapt more. Jumping out.
Thank you, Richard. That was for me, very timely. and I appreciate your insights. I have been very distressed by the recent occurrences in our country and started with, of course, the metta meditation. And like you pointed out, not just for the victim and the victim's family, but also for the perpetrator. And I will even go so far as to say, especially for the perpetrators. In doing that, in finding that place of compassion and understanding for the perpetrators, I still could sense a deep sense of grief and suffering, and therefore anger, because anger is the fundamental seed of grief. And I could feel that in myself, even with the meditation on compassion, even with the meditation on friendship and loving kindness. So I spoke to Bhante Viveka, our Theravadan monk here actually, and he sent me in the direction of equanimity. And he said, focus your meditations there rather than on compassion, because really it is the most subtle and the most expansive and the most really fundamental element of all of the Brahma Viharas, of all of the divine abodes. And I found, and you beautifully touched on that, that seems to be where I'm finding that ability to be peace, so that I can be in that mode of friendship and kindness when I'm with others. So thank you very much for encouraging and and reinforcing that also. It's much appreciated.
May I end with one last thing?
Sure.
There's a Zen, one of the Zen vows or whatever that I've learned in the past was that greed, hatred, ignorance arise endlessly, and I vow to abandon them all.
That's a wonderful vow. And with this, your time is up. Greg, I'm sorry, I will time you at the 5 minute, because I don't have the flash.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'm Craig from Connecticut. First of all, I want to thank the DTO for existing, for providing this opportunity. I found out about you guys 4.5 years ago and started practicing with you 4 years ago. And it has made a tremendous difference in my life. So I thank you. I have a lot of gratitude. My talk today, there's a lot of stuff that came up over the year based on the readings that we do in class, but then also other readings. What I wanted to talk to you today was about a fairly recent one that I came across. I've been reading the Denko Roku, which is the principal work of Keizan Zenji. This is the Cleary translation. The title is The Transmission of Light. So the Denko Roku is was written in 1300, and it's 1600 years or so of Dharma transmission in the Soto Zen tradition. And it's basically what was the epiphany, what was the moment of awakening for these people that carried on the lineage. This particular one was Parshva. From Parshva was the 10th successor in the lineage, and he accepted as a student Punyayashash, which may not be the way you pronounce it, but he wound up being the 11th successor in it. So they're generally in the form of a koan with then some interpretation. And it's interesting, the koan itself has got some really powerful lessons in it. So that by itself is reason enough to discuss it or to think about it. But in the course of discussing it and thinking about it, I realized that I had a fundamental misunderstanding about something that I learned a long, long time ago, and this brought it out. So I'll get to that at the end. So this is the koan. Punyayashash stood before Parshva. Parshva asked him, "Where do you come from?" Punyayashash said, "My mind is not in movement." "Where is your abode?" "My mind is not stationary." "Are you certain?" "The Buddhas were also thus." Then Parshva said, "You are not the Buddhas, and the Buddhas also are not so." This last statement caused Punyayashash to spend the next 3 weeks in deep contemplation, trying to understand what Parshva meant by it, realizing his truth. After he finally realized the truth, he came back and said, "Even the Buddhas are not really so, and neither are you." And at that point, Parshva was then accepted. Parshna then accepted Punyayashash as his student. So the interpretation of this was partly mine, partly what I read. But I was impressed by the first two questions that Punyayashash had. So where do you come from? My mind is not in movement, meaning that there is coming and going on the outside, but within the mind, it is still. So my mind is not in movement. His response to where is your abode? And abode to me had special significance. But where is your abode? He said, my mind is not stationary, meaning that his mind does not abide anywhere. And again, abide, the meaning, it's the translation, I think, is the patishita, meaning to contain in or to be situated in. So Punyavasha doubled down when Parshva asked him, "Are you certain?" by saying, the Buddhas were also thus. And so he was trying to lend credence to his thought, saying that, well, the Buddhists thought this also. So it's, it is a correct thing to think. But then Parshna kind of smote him when he said, you are not the Buddhas, and the Buddhas are not so. So this meaning of that was that, your thoughts are good. They're still just thoughts. Don't try to be a Buddha, he said. The Buddhas didn't try to be Buddhas. So your aspirations cannot be realized by chasing concepts, because your aspirations is for something that is non-conceptual. I mean, the concepts can get you there, but you have to leave them behind. So after 3 weeks, Parshna was able to free himself. After 3 weeks, he was able to free himself from the Buddhas. So the term that they use there, which is, I think, a quite evocative term, is this is awakening acceptance of the uncreated. Oh, I'm running out of time. 300 seconds goes by fast. The chronicler recaps this by saying, my mind is not the Buddhas and not you either. Coming and going have been here all along. So in this case, coming and going are the waves on the ocean of samsaric waves on the ocean. So the interesting side note that this brought up was when they were talking about the word abide. A long time ago, I read a passage from the Diamond Sutra and didn't realize it was the Diamond Sutra at the time, but abiding nowhere, let the mind work. And it was just kind of blew me away when I heard that, and still does. But in hearing Punyayasha's response to where is your abode, saying my mind is not stationary, I realized that I had misinterpreted it without thinking about it. Instead of the expression being abiding nowhere, I had come to think about it without really realizing it, that I was thinking it was being nowhere, which is very different than abiding nowhere. So abiding is to be caught by your mental formations, but being nowhere is not possible, because we exist in this coming and going. This is where our lives are. So anyway, I realized that, so this had the effect of disavowing that the coming and going have been here all along, that the commentator talked about, and caused me to skillfully disengage. So it was an interesting realization. I don't think I did it all the time, but I think it was there underlying a lot of my actions. So skillful means is vitally important. Thank you.
Feedback for Craig?
This is Dave. Thank you so much, Craig. I actually recently have been exploring going back to the Koan and related practices. Could you tell us again the source for that particular one that you spoke of? Just like a collection that it's part of?
Sure. The book is Transmission of Light. So Zen and the Art of Enlightenment by Master Keizan. So Keizan was, I think, a successor to Dogen. So he wrote it, and he was doing a recollection of all of the masters for the past 13 or 1600 years.
Okay.
The particular one that I'm looking at was translated by Thomas Cleary. But it is actually, it's the Denko Roku is what the work is.
Okay.
Cleary just named his Transmission of Light.
Denko Roku?
Yeah, DENKO ROKU. Denko Roku.
Thank you.
And so it's just a series of 53 different chapters on the different masters and how they came to their initial awakening. This one was Punyayashash.
I was able to get most of the stuff down that you said was involved in it about mind is not in motion, mind is not stationary, and so forth. So I was just thinking if I have that reference back to the original, that'll be nice, because that actually, as a lot of the things that have been said in the past, 30-40 minutes, that hit home pretty
cool.
So
thank you.
Thank you.
It did for me also.
Yeah, good.
Craig, this is Michelle. I just, I don't have any questions or any bright comments at this point, other than to say, as always, you've left me with something to now go and think about even more. So maybe I'll come back in 3 weeks with a comment. But I just want to say thank you, because I do appreciate the breadth of practice that you do have, and it's evident, when you bring forth a topic for us, whether it's 5 minutes or whether it is sitting with you for an entire class. I learn something every time. So I'll be back in 3 weeks. So thank you.
Thanks, Michelle.
Good morning, Craig. This is Richard. Richard Z. We have 2 Richards, of course, in our Sangha. So I appreciated your mentioning the Diamond Sutra, which I think that line was coming to mind for me as well. I think it perfectly fits with the wisdom in this koan. So my question for you is, do you remember from our studies maybe 2 or 3 years ago, who was awakened while walking through the marketplace when he heard a nun chanting that line in particular from the Dharma, or from the Diamond Sutra?
Hunen.
Yeah.
Huning, or the 5th patriarch.
6th patriarch.
6th
yeah.
patriarch, yeah.
Dwell nowhere and bring forth this mind. A few years ago, I read a book, kind of a very casual book, but well worth reading. And it was a conversation, I'm sure some of you are familiar with it, between Bernie Glassman Roshi and Jeff Bridges. And they talked about that particular line. And they went a step further with it, which at the time I found kind of provocative, and I sat with it for several months. And they just said that when you dwell nowhere, in a sense, you open yourself up to everything. So another way to look at it is you're dwelling everywhere. And being receptive to everything, which I thought was an interesting sort of way to look at it from another side. Yeah. There's a chapter in the Tao Te Ching I've always appreciated. It's, I want to say chapter 47, and it starts with these words: without going outside your room, you may know the whole world. and without looking through your window, you may see the ways of heaven, which I think kind of captures the gist of the same teaching. But beautiful presentation. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. That was awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Next person.
Yes. Good morning or afternoon or whatever it is in your place of being. My name is Tom McNally. I'll give you a little background on how I came to the DTO. I was introduced by my friend Jeff, and I was really happy to be there. But one of the things that drew me to it more than anything else were the precepts, because in the 1980s, I joined the Green Party and did the demonstrations, and it was a lot like today. And when I looked at the precepts, they mirrored the 10 core values of the Green Party. So I said, you know, I'm almost home. But the topic I picked out today to share, and sharing myself, is impermanence. The reason I picked out this topic is I just found out I'm 82. I always thought I was 81, but I never did the math. And now I looked at my medical chart and I found out I'm 82. And in my time of life, I know that loss is coming to me. But I've also experienced many losses throughout my lifetime. My sibling, my parents, of course. I had lost 2 children and a grandchild. So dealing with loss and grief is what made me think getting over the grief was basically with the compassion and loving kindness of others. But I looked into grief a little bit more, and grief even is a natural emotion. We're not going to get rid of it. And we suffer because we attach ourselves so much. But I think, and I read that there's a difference between attaching and clinging. When you attach yourself, and you lose yourself, you lose the person you were attached to. Grief follows, but also if you can dwell on the impermanence of all life. Life is change. The only permanent thing is change. If things didn't change, we would be lost in a world of Groundhog Day, the movie. Same thing over and over and over again. We have to move, you know. The thing that I think about now is when I'm close to a person, I want to do deep listening. I want to be there with them. I want to show compassion, loving kindness, especially if somebody isn't having trouble. And that goes with deep listening. And it goes with just reassuring them that you're there, that you're listening. Change helps me get through things. One of the changes, really one thing that helps me out a lot is when I really screw up, I think of impermanence. You know, this is going to go away. I won't be hanging around forever. But I think I wrote some notes down here. I know that my time is numbered. My ticket's going to be punched. And it's not going to be too far along because I'm at the age that you expect it. I hope that I can go out as gracefully. And in the Buddha tradition of calmness and knowing that it's the time, that nothing lasts forever. Grief, when I would lose someone in the past, I would always want want to go back to when they were alive, but they're not. And I had to go on. But I spend, well, I'm my only companion in my home now is my dog, but we get along famously, and if he wants something, or if he just wants attention, I give it to him, because I know he's not going to live forever. And I know that I want to spend precious moments with him. And when we go for a walk, I go for a walk and I just look around me, and I enjoy my rose bush because it's blossoming. I enjoy the birds that I hear singing. I enjoy the view. I enjoy the noise. That gives my life a lot of meaning. And I think it's also in a Buddhist tradition. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. Any comments, remarks for Thomas?
Yeah, this is Ted. Thanks, Tom. Good to see you. And of course, a very relevant topic for everybody. I'm wondering, have you explored or considered what we hear all the time mentioned in numerous sutras, the Buddhist concepts of no birth, no death? Have you contemplated those ideas? I'm just curious about what your thoughts are.
Yes, I have contemplated that, and I've also contemplated my own death, because I know I'm not going to last forever, and I know that everything is, but it's not there. It's not, there is. I don't know how to explain it, but I have contemplated the birth, the death, and it's just fabric. You're part of the fabric of life. You're not an individual. You're not interbeing. You're part of everything. So that's as far as I went on that.
Ruth from Virginia Beach, from Donahue Sangha. I want to make kind of a bridge between what Craig was talking about and what you're talking about. And when he was reading about the difference in abiding and being. And I think abiding in that sense of the word, as I think I understood it and have understood it, implies some level of a clinging or attachment, because you are in a place and you are abiding there. Whereas when you are being, there's some more fluidity, and there is birth and death, and there is not birth and death at the same time, because you can just be in it. It's kind of a bridge for me between the conventional and the absolute levels of reality, and the being allows that, because it just is what it is, and it does not have to have definition, and we can be in that place, or that non-place, or that fluidity. There is peace. As soon as I start trying to abide in a place, then it gets stuck. It gets stagnant. Like was said, if there is no change, then nothing. Like you said, when there is no change, nothing can grow. So thank you both, and bringing Craig's, abiding and being into what you're saying. So Ruth out.
Thank you.
I'd like to bow in.
Yes, Janet.
there is a prayer that is recited in the evening in Zen monasteries. I'm sure that many of you are familiar with it. It's called the Evening Gatha. And this is a prayer that is transformative. If you recite it and reflect on it and practice it. There is a line in the Evening Gatha that's sometimes omitted, even in the Zen monasteries, because I'm sure that some people find it a little difficult to deal with. But the Evening Gatha, oh, I'm sorry, I knew this, that's why I was unmuted. I said, well, that's why I was hesitant to become unmuted, because I have a companion here. Be quiet, Mary. Good that's going to do. But it's very short. And it goes like this. Let me respectfully remind you, life and death are of supreme importance. Time passes swiftly and opportunity is lost. This is the line that's sometimes omitted, I will say it. This day, our lives are decreased by one day. Each of us should strive to awaken. Awaken. Take heed. Do not squander your life. For me, that prayer is so centering that when it is reality itself. And when I pray it, I feel a tremendous sense of, one, being in my body and knowing that there's no artifice when I pray that prayer. It somehow is very comforting to me, even with that line. So bowing out.
Thank you. Bowing in again. That's something I do also. I don't do the prayer, but I look in the mirror at night before I go to bed and I say, you've lived one more day. And in the morning, I wake up and I look in the mirror and I say, you have another day. But I also think in my mind, this is one day you're not going to have again. This is just today. You don't know. I don't know how many more mornings I'm going to wake up and look in the mirror and see that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom. Kathy, are you up to it?
First, I want to say that I'm very happy to be here. I wouldn't be here if we weren't Zooming. Some of you heard this before, but yesterday I fell off a ladder and broke my wrist and did something to my knees so that I can't walk at the moment. So I'm here in my bed, but thanks to Zoom, I can be here. And so I thank you for allowing me to be here even in my current state. So when I was in the ER last night, I was thinking about, what I might say today. And the first thing that popped into my mind is what I'm going to talk about. I remember when I first, shortly after I first arrived at our temple, and I was attending the Wednesday evening meditation service. After I did my first Dharma talk, which was an icebreaker type of thing, then it was time to do another one. And as I was looking for something to do, I came across this article. I think it's in The Lion's Roar by Thich Nhat Hanh. And I looked at it and I saw this line. If you are a poet, you will see clearly that there is a cloud floating in this sheet of paper. I'll never forget the moment I saw that. And it touched me in some deep way. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew I wanted to find out. And so I read that beautiful article. It's called The Heart Sutra, The Fullness of Emptiness. And I understood very little on an intellectual level, but I think I understood a whole lot inside. And I ran around reading the whole entire long article to anybody who would listen to me because I loved it so much. I grew up with a, very much attached to an immortal soul. So this emptiness was a little bit unusual to me. But the cloud floating on a sheet of paper was a little bit of a gateway into emptiness for me. So of course, then, he goes on to talk about how, you can look at the paper and you see the sunshine, and you can see the logger who cuts down the tree, and all of that. And I began to get a little bit of insight. And then later on, I just came upon a poem because I was looking up, a lot of Thich Nhat Hanh's work because I really resonated with his teachings. And I found this poem. And some of you have heard me say the whole poem. Fortunately, I will not do that this morning. But it's a poem by Thich Nhat Hanh, and it's called Call Me By My True Names. And when I was reading this poem, I was just amazed, and I didn't understand it at first. For example, I am the child in Uganda, all skin and bones, my legs as thin as bamboo sticks, and I am the arms merchant selling deadly weapons to Uganda. Didn't know what he was talking about. But as I studied and meditated on it more, I began to understand. And it really changed my life when I started to really get an idea about what that really meant, which was the emptiness, which is so tied up with interbeing. You can't separate them. Obviously, it's interbeing, right? But that interbeing, that we're all so intimately connected with everyone on this planet, or anyone in the solar system or in the universe, and not just human beings, all beings. It's a very amazing teaching that has really changed the way I look at things. Then later on, I came across a very simple little practice that I use all the time. And it's called Just Like Me. I think Pema Chodron had talked about that in some CD I was, or some video I was watching. And in this practice, whenever I find myself in a situation where my emotions, where I'm reacting with a strong emotion, or anything like that, I think to myself, just like me, that person is angry sometimes. Just like me, that person is afraid. That person worries. Just like me. And the more I started doing it, the more interbeing became real to me. And in the past couple of weeks in particular, and as we all know, these the racial injustice that we've all been watching and grieving over, that's I look at that police officer in Minneapolis. You know that picture, where that picture of him with his knee on the neck. And I look at him and I think to myself, just like me, this person is suffering. Just like me, this person is angry sometimes. And so I not only, of course, look at our dear George Floyd, but also the officers who ended his life. And I try my best to, to live in that sense of interbeing. Thank you.
Any questions or comments for Sister Fab? Oh, Elena bowing in. I just want to thank you, Fat Land, for being here in spite of your little heavy-duty dance yesterday. I just want to say that what you mentioned about that dichotomy, that we are both the anger and the joy, we are both the aggression and the peacefulness, we are both the giving and the taking. I think that's so real and so important for us, for all of us right now in our country, in the world, in everything that's going on. And I want to thank you for bringing it up, because we sometimes tend to be one-sided, and like John said earlier, being in the middle way is so important, because that's what helps us see when we are going to the one side or the other. So I appreciate your teaching, your talk, and because this really has nourished me today. Thank you.
Thank you, Elena.
This is Dave. Thank you so much, Fatblan, for sharing that with us. I just wanted to, you know, there's been so much confusion and reactivity and anger and fear and so forth, I think, for all of us all over the world, particularly recently. And I really appreciate you mentioning the Pema Chodron practice of just like me. I've heard you speak on it before, and I've seen Pema herself speak on it. And I wanted to share one similar practice that I got from her many, many years ago that helped me through some very difficult stuff that I was going through, is the practice of other people feel this. And so when I would be, you know, feeling whatever it was I was feeling, dealing with whatever difficult state that I was dealing with, where I might be actually really feeling alienated and separated from humanity in general, from people around me, that sort of thing, I would come back to that touchstone of other people feel this. And it's a practice that resonates with me still, and it comes up still. And thank you for mentioning that one picture, that one that we all know. And because that's been one that has been for me a reminder that we all experience these things. You know, just like me, other people experience overwhelming states at times. You know, that there's so much that can be seen in the picture and in some of the videos. And then in speaking with a lot of the people, and then I'll shut up real quick, but I want to say, in speaking with a lot of the people that I speak with, I've been hearing a lot of people talking about their own states of reactive distress. And, you know, how quickly they might be reacting to something somebody says in the grocery store, for instance, or, you know, just all those little, what we would usually think of as everyday little stressors. And how quickly these things are bringing up anger and fear and confusion. And, you know, we're all experiencing these things. So thank you. Much gratitude.
Richard bowing in. First of all, I love how you said that, you know, you need to, again, just like me, I've heard enlightenment is intimacy with all things. And I I think that's, putting yourself there and with those feelings and trying to understand them is part of what enlightenment is, at least. And the second thing is, it sounds like you have a really gravity problem there in Texas, so I'm not coming there right now. So I hope you'll feel better.
I'm sure I will, if they ever set this wrist. Thanks.
Tay, did you want to say something? Yes, Tay. Go ahead.
Yes, just like to say that sorry to her that you got the accident, and I hope that you will be recover soon. And about the situation, I have some an idea about the what going on in the country. That there are two things that are very dangerous. That is the coronavirus and the violence. Both is very, very harmful. And in those situations, I think the calm mind and compassionate mind is the only way vital important in this situation. For the violence, we should have understanding and love for them. Just like the parents, the father or mother with the crying child, we should not discipline him right away, but we should try to comfort him and then later talk to him to see what is right and wrong. And for that, we need the understanding and love in this situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Tay. Okay, Fab, your time's up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, this is Jeff following in. So I'm very happy to be here. It's good to see everyone. It is good to see some new quarantine beards, such as Richie and Tom and other DTO members near and far. And Tom and I also have a friend who recently fell off his roof and was actually injured quite seriously. He is healing now. But I wonder if this is part of a side effect of quarantine, with all of us doing so many more projects at work. And just ask that we all be careful and stay safe. So I'm just want to talk a little about my practice and how I've been working to kind of get a more regular practice. 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, in our April retreat, I talked with Ty and said, I go to retreats and I'm energized and I start my practice and then it kind of fades. And I kept mentioning about trying to do something every day and during the week, and Ty said, well, what about the weekend? I said, yeah, I have some time on the weekend. Says, well, do practices on the weekend. And it was very good. Thank you, Ty. This I have actually stuck with doing my practice on the weekend pretty much every weekend since then. And I have my list of things to do still written down from when Ty and I talked. It's basically our practice, and it's been very good. Thank you, Ty. So one kind of key part or interesting part is during my sitting meditation and what to do in that. And I had done counting and following breath, and at times would have a very good meditation, but it was very kind of variable. So I remembered a Dharma talk and also from our DTO class about the sutra on the full awareness of breathing. So I began to practice with that. So as you probably recall, the sutra on the full awareness of breathing has 16 exercises grouped in sets of 4, and the sets of 4 align with body, feeling, mind, and objects of mind. So the 4 establishments of mindfulness. When I started to practice with this, the first exercises are I'm breathing in a long breath. I know I'm breathing in a long breath. Breathing in a short breath. I know I'm breathing in a short breath. And then awareness of body, calming body, and then moving to feelings. And when I first started practicing, I was very kind of focused on practicing each individual like stanza kind of until I had it perfectly. And I would find that my time would run out and I would be, 4, 5, 6 stanzas in. And this was repeating, and I was noticed I was getting stuck on this. So I decided to, let me try just kind of a set time for each one. So I would do either like 3 or 4 slow breaths with each one while focusing on it. And whether I had it perfect or not, I would move on. And I found this much more beneficial, and I could get through all 16 exercises, granted, especially some of the kind of, more advanced thinking ones further on, I might not have, perfectly, but some I would still get much from, particularly, aware of my mental formations and then calming mental formations, that by the time you get to those, been meditating for a little while and already have some stability in the moment, and other things could come up that I could deal with, such as things with family or work or out in society. And I, to me, it's moving from trying to do it perfectly to doing it with more of a time was a wonderful thing. And I realized that actually aligns with a couple lines from the Heart Sutra that I really love. So about in the middle of the sutra is no ill being, no cause of ill being, no end of ill being, and no path, no understanding and no attainment. Because there is no attainment, the bodhisattvas grounded in perfect understanding find no obstacles for their minds. And I realized that by trying to do the stanzas perfectly, I was trying so hard for attainment that it was a significant obstacle. And that once I kind of removed that, focusing on attainment and just practice, it removed those obstacles and really helped in my practice.
Thank you, Jeff. Any comments for Jeff? Any feedback? Elena Baunin. Jeff, thank you so much for bringing up the 4 mindfulness practices. It's really, really inspiring because, I teach and I practice mindfulness, and it's true what you say. I have experience at that times when even after long time being practicing and teaching and guiding this meditation, you still get caught up in achieving, in attaining. And it's, I guess that's what the mind does. That's what happens when we are engaged in so many things that we need to engage in our everyday lives. So we want to attain, we want to be sure that we're doing the right thing. But for me, what works is working, feeling, and experiencing the feelings that I am as they evolve during my meditation and during the practice, and try to connect the feeling with the breath and see how my feeling is affecting my breath. And in that way, I find that kind of liberating for me. Elena, bowing out. Thank you.
This is Dave. I just wanted to mention that where you're talking about attainment, it reminds me of some of the teachings on aimlessness, where it suggested that we not put anything out before us to chase after. And I love, Jeff, that you brought it back to those lines in the Heart Sutra as well. And it reminds me of just coming back to just this moment, just being in this moment as it is, and not setting a goal out in front of us for what that moment should look like, should, quote unquote, because that's our idea of how things should be, separates us and pulls us away from the actuality of what this moment is. And it can be such a challenging practice to come back to just what this moment is, and not getting caught up in trying to make the moment look different, make the moment look according to how we think it should look. And then we're just chasing around in our own, or I mean, and this is something I've witnessed in myself, chasing around in our own minds, ideas of what things should look like. And that separates us from just being. So I very much appreciate you sharing that with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
This is Craig bowing in. Thank you, Jeff. That was really interesting. I also was caught by the idea of non-attainment, and it's an interesting balance that we have to use, because the non-attainment, I mean, sometimes with skillful means, especially skillful means with yourself, sometimes it is helpful to have attainment. So for instance, like meditation, I use a meditation app, and they give you little prizes for, like, X days in a row, or you've done this many, which is stupid. Granted, it's stupid and it's attainment, and it's, I realize that. But on the other hand, it actually works. So, what do you do? I mean, I've been doing it, but I know it's silly, and I know it's a joke. But it is a balance that we have to figure out when it works and when it doesn't work. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Craig. Yeah, I think for me, what a key thing is to kind of do what works to kind of advance along the path, and to have goals, but not be attached to a particular way. Like for too long, I was attached to trying to meditate during the week, and there just wasn't time, so I had to kind of let that go. So it's kind of to gently have this desire to move in the kind of a good direction, but not be too attached to any particular method or near-term outcome.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Ted Rasmussen from Connecticut, from the Connecticut Sangha. So let's see, I think it's my turn, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes.
So anyway, first I'd like to say that, just a little bit of context. I've just finished the 4th year, and I really appreciate doing the Dharma Festival, formerly Dharma Combat, because it really provides the very last couple of our classes got ended by coronavirus, and this allows us, and me especially, just speaking for myself, to feel like we have some completion for the end of 4 years of study. So I contemplated what topic to bring up, and I'd invite inquiry into it from me. But surprisingly enough, after some thinking, I decided that I wanted to talk about no attainment. So thank you, Jeff, and everybody for introducing my topic. And it's really funny, it kind of activates my ego. I feel like, oh my gosh, they've already discussed everything I want to say before I even say it. And so that allows me to say, I'm having a reaction. But you know what? I'm not the first person to ever read the Heart Sutra, so it's fine. So no attainment. I too was struck, the line in the Heart Sutra, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas, they're grounded in perfect understanding and find no obstacles in their minds. It makes it sound like once they stop trying to obtain, then there's perfect understanding and no obstacles for mind. That's like freedom, because being in my mind is suffering much of the time. But me, like all human beings, I've suffered from attainment. And I'm going to have a better meditation schedule. I'm going to meditate perfectly. I'm going to understand the Dharma. I'm going to go from a place of lacking to a place of having. And so I think, if I am actually in that mode, I am practicing attainment, and I'm actually practicing suffering. I'm practicing dissatisfaction. So if I'm searching for something, trying to achieve something, trying to make something better, I am actually practicing dissatisfaction, and I'm like a million miles away from the mark, which I have done many times. But I've come to kind of realize that over 4 years. Understand it is a better word than realize. So if I'm practicing attainment, I think that's the same as practicing dissatisfaction or dukkha. And then, it brings up all these questions of, well, it's never good enough. So it's like, why do I lack, enlightenment? Why do I lack peace and calm? Why am I not doing better than this? And so it creates a sense of lack if I'm practicing no attainment, or if I'm practicing attainment. And it also reinforces the concept of I or me or self, because it's I that am lacking. It's me that is not attaining, etc. So it's a wonderful joy to just be able to leap clear of trying to attain things. And what happens then is I can just kind of manifest things as they are. I am sitting, I am breathing, I am looking at birds, I am working, I am cleaning the house. And even better yet, drop the I, cleaning the house, watching birds, sitting, and that's really liberating, to be free of all of the nonsense of there's something I need that I lack. And it can be in my meditation practice. It can be my view of what I hope to get, all of these things. And the last thing, I would say, in thinking and contemplating this, is that I'm thinking about like Buddha nature. How do I possibly attain Buddha nature? How can I attain something that I already have? This is a silly notion. It's like, how do I find the rabbit with horns? I'm trying to attain something that I already have. And so, when I find the right way, it's like finding my lost keys in my pocket. I'm standing on my own enlightenment. Get off of the enlightenment. Stop standing on it. Just manifest it. So that no attainment is what my topic was. And thank you, everybody, for prepping the ground for me. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. That was perfect timing, Ted.
Oh, thank you.
Any feedback for Ted? Yes, Ted.
Yes, if we can issue the certificate of enlightenment, I will issue it for him. That is a great idea. The practice of non-attachment, because as long as we attach on something, we still have the desire in that, and as long as we have a desire, we still suffering. And why should we? Usually when people start to practice, they expect that they should reach some level to go to somewhere. Just like you start the college, you want to graduate it. But it's no need if you already graduated. So for Buddhism, as soon as we practice, we're already there. As long as our mind calm and clear, we're already in Nirvana. We don't need to take the spaceship to go to Nirvana, because Nirvana it never exists anywhere in the universe. So the practice of non-attachment is very deep understanding and practice of Buddhism. Thank you. Oh, one more thing I would like to, I have to leave now because I have an appointment at 11 o'clock. So please continue. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tay. Thank you for coming.
I don't need a certificate. I'm fine. Thank you.
Fernando, bowing in. Thanks, Ted. I think sort of very appropriate to all the different talks is I find that one of the practices that has always helped me is the practice of letting go. Letting go of my expectations of myself, letting go of the kind of emotional attachments to things, to say like Tom said, to my dog, to my car, to all my children, loving them, but understanding that everything is impermanent and I'm going to have to let them go. Because when I concentrate, I try to meditate on letting go, I'm able to experience and enjoy the now more, because that's all we have, our present moment, to be able to enjoy everything we do. Like Ted talked about, I used to hate the weekends because I have so many junk things to do, like going shopping or cleaning the yard. Now I love doing those things because that's just the way it is. It used to get me depressed knowing that I had nothing fun to do. Everything is fun because I'm letting go of my conceptions and I'm enjoying the now.
John Barnier. I think thanks for all your talk, correct, Jeff and Ted. I think you all hit the same issue that basically the basic human nature, that when we do something, we set some expectation. And whether the expectation line up with reality or not. So practicing letting go, like Fernando says, or aimlessness against our human nature at startup might be difficult. So one of the Jeff questions is whether some of the practice method, like you do it, on a timely, on a schedule, which it helps, because I think from that perspective, it establishes you a new habit that against our own, old habits. And one of the things it helps me is that believe in the karma. Whatever you do now would generate wholesome seed, whether it go sprout immediately or whether it's gonna contribute to something down the road, 5 years, next life. Believe that, then whatever you do helps you to not to expect, all the effort you put in, not expect to go right away, but it would eventually give up good result at some point down the time later. John buying out.
Heather? Heather? No? Okay, your time is up anyway.
Hi, this is Sylvia from Texas. I just finished my first year of DTO, and what a wonderful year has been. It has really changed my life. We don't have a lot of Dharma to share because I'm new, but I would like to share my life story to tell you about how this first year changed my life. I was always an extremist. My dad was in the military, and my parents have 8 children. It's always yes or no in the family. There's no such thing as compromising. Obedience is a must. When something say something, when my parents say something, we should do it without any questions. There's no middle way, and that's what I want to talk about today. I grew up as a very happy child because I was very protected from everything in the world. When I get married, I didn't realize that I grew up in a very extreme environment. So, and I pretty much was pampered by all my siblings. I was the 6th child in the family. So all the heavy duty stuff, all my elderly siblings were doing them. And anything minor, I had 2 little ones to do for me. So I'm just kind of hanging out in the house, having fun. So I was extremely happy. My first year of marriage was a rude awakening because I became extremely unhappy because the extreme personality that I have. So I decided this wasn't for me. So I moved home to my mom's house. So my eldest brother had been practicing Buddhism for a long time, a very wise man, told me, sat me down and had one statement to say. He didn't explain much. He just said, Sylvia, I want you to think about this and decide what you want to do with your life. Nothing had to be, it doesn't matter who's right, who's wrong. It is the results that matters. And then he left. And I sat there, I was in my early 20s, and I'm like, what do you mean? No, there has to be right or wrong. There's no such thing, because that's what I grew up. So I thought about it, and I said, okay, I don't want to be a statistic. I don't want to get a divorce. So I moved back home with my husband and continued. And I listened to my brother, and everything I did was, okay, it doesn't matter who's right or wrong, just stay married, be a good wife. And I became a mother of 2 sons, be a good mother. Well, 26 years passed, and I continued to suffer. And I didn't understand why. I didn't understand what my brother said was the middle way, because I didn't understand it. I couldn't practice it. So at the end of the 26 years of marriage, I become physically ill. I am mentally exhausted. I thought I gave into everything because he told me it doesn't matter who's right or wrong, just focus on the result. And what I focused on was stay married, to be a good wife, to be a good mother. And at the end, I lost myself. There was no balance. I was extremely one way. And so the divorce happened. And again, I stayed an extreme person, not knowing that who I was. I cried every day. I couldn't work for a year. It was devastating because I kept asking myself, I've done everything I could. Why is it not working? So then after that, I read the newsletter about the DTO class for years, or not years, but during my marriage when I moved to Thailand. I just never did have time to go. So I finally decided that, you know what, I need to find peace because right now nothing works in my life. Everything is a mess. My ex moved to a different state, and my 2 children stayed with me. And we continue to have problems because I was being an extreme mom. I have so much expectation from them that it's just messed up my life. So I've learned now that being extremist is not going to help me. Being a middle way is what will help me to stay sane. So the DTO class has taught me to be in the middle way. And I'm not sure you remember last time we met, I told you I was able to go to my backyard and look at a tree for 3 hours, and it was the most happy moment in my life. I was able to let go. I was able to let go of the guilt of being perfect, of being extreme, of everything has to be perfect. And that it's okay to be in the middle. So that's what I want to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. Any feedback for Sylvia?
Kyle here. Sylvia, thank you very much for sharing that story. One of the things in the story that really it's got me thinking about is your brother speaking to you. You know, oftentimes from my experience, and often I'm the only person in my family life of people who, you know, they say, oh, you meditate, you understand something deeper. And in the end, I feel like I give advice, which sounds exactly what your brother said. And, you know, it's important, I think, reminder for me to think that you just give what you can at the time, but then to see a result like that so profoundly affect you years and years later, where it sticks with you, and then when the timing is right, that you say you understand it's more of a middle way thing. That actually is a very happy point for me, and I'm very happy for you that when the timing was right, those seeds were still with you, and now it's being able to affect you in such a positive way. Even if you want to stare at a tree for 3 more hours, it's great. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you, Kyle.
Craig bowing in. Sylvia, thank you for your talk. That was really wonderful. I just be very fast, but staring at the tree, finding the middle way, I could sense an emotion came over me of just this, I think of what you were feeling, and it's wonderful. So I wanted to thank you for sharing that.
Thank you, Greg.
This is Dave. I'll also be very quick, but I wanted to share, Sylvia, that when you spoke about how you said to yourself, this isn't working. Why isn't this working? And you know, after the 25 years of marriage and so forth, and it was an image came to mind for me that really resonates of how sometimes we can get to that point, and we might just dig in even more and more to the thing that we think that's supposed to work. And you know, maybe it actually kind of goes back to the aimlessness piece that I mentioned before, but you know, we can become so attached to this thing that we think is supposed to work to get that result. And another alternative is to fall apart, and which of course can involve a great deal of suffering and pain. And then it's beautiful, though, if we can find the people and maybe the Dharma tools and, you know, understandings that we can grow through those processes of falling apart. And I'll just add that something that's been on my mind quite a bit recently is how there seems to be a whole lot of falling apart going on all around us right now. And one of the things that's been very powerful for me, or very, very much a strong reminder for me, is to come back to, you know, crisis is also opportunity. And I think it's attributed to the Chinese that the character for crisis actually is made up of 2 parts: danger and opportunity. And I hear quite a bit of that in what you said, Sylvia. So thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Elena Baunin. So Sylvia, thank you so much for sharing your personal story. I think it's very enriching. And I just want to say that, you know, the Buddha taught the Dharma to many, many different people, and he taught it at different levels according to the people's capacity that he was teaching. And for some of the arhants that are mentioned in the Dharma, I cannot even remember their names right now. They had been hearing the Dharma or the teachings for a long time, but not clicking. Nothing would, you know, being awakened or anything. All of a sudden, one event, one flower, like in the case of Ananda, one flower would make that awakening happening. So it seems like your awakening to the Dharma happened when you were ready, when your heart was ready, receptive, and your mind was open. So it's wonderful that you were able to follow that call. Thank you.
Thank you, Lena.
And your time is up. Sorry.
Janet bowing in from Southington, Connecticut, the Dharma Teacher Order. I would like to talk about the 5 remembrances and how they affected my life. Can't remember when I first became acquainted with them, but it comes from the Upajjhāsana Sutra, laid forth by the Buddha over 2,500 years ago, and they're still very relevant today. I'm just going to repeat the five remembrances quickly. I am of the nature to grow old. There is no way to escape growing old. I am of the nature to have ill health. There is no way to escape having ill health. I am of the nature to die. There is no way to escape death. All that is dear to me and everyone I love are of the nature to change. There is no way to escape being separated from them. I inherit the results of my actions in body, speech, and mind. My actions are the ground on which I stand. I have to say that these remembrances were a good part in helping me grow up when I read them the first time. And I repeat them periodically when life gets tough and I don't understand what's going on around me. And I feel like I can't handle it. Regarding the growing old, I am growing old. And when I first became a member of AARP, I didn't want anybody to know how old I was. And I was young then. I was in my 50s. And so now I am in my 70s. And, you know, it's okay to say I'm 70. And I am proceeding on the path of life. And it's okay. And I have my Dharma friends and my Dharma lessons. I am of the nature to have ill health. Yes, I witnessed my parents both have ill health when I was in my 20s and they were in their 50s, and they subsequently passed away from their ill health. I know that my friends have ill health, and it rips my heart apart to see some of the suffering people go through with cancer and various ill health. And I myself suffered from cancer, so that really evokes a lot of sympathy and heartfelt empathy in me when I know of someone who is really experiencing a lot of ill health. I am of the nature to die. Yes, this will happen. And I like the second part of that. There is no way to escape death. 2 years ago, I lost my 50-year-old son to pancreatic cancer. And I have to say that this remembrance was there with me when he passed away. And he couldn't escape his death. He had the ill health, and he was the nature to die. And he couldn't escape death. And it wasn't any part of me saying, why did this happen? And, oh, it's all, all the stories. I really took this remembrance to heart, that there was no way for him to escape his death, albeit the way it was. And then all that is near to me, everyone I love is subject to change. That was a very important part of my life when I got divorced. I did not want my loving, youthful love to change. I wanted to keep my love going, and it didn't stay that way. Impermanence between two personalities and various other things that changed along the way in my life were a part of me that I've come to accept now, that things do change, people change. And then this is the last remembrance. The results of my actions are the ground on which I stand. And these are the things I can change in my life. And I relate to the Eightfold Path being part of what I need to remember every day, of the actions and what I can do to make my life better and those around me better. And I just refer to these 5 remembrances a lot during my days, and I am so grateful for the Sangha and all of you listening to my talk today. Thank you.
Thank you. Any feedback for our sister, Janet?
John Yan. Thank you. Thank you for bringing up those remembrances. I think it's really helped us to set our expectation to close to reality. One minor comment is that when I practice though, that I add the last remembrances, an extra one. I said, I'm in the nature to become a Buddha if I keep practicing.
Janet Real.
Thank you, Janet. This is the other Janet, Janet Reale. I'm very glad that you talked about the 5 remembrances. They are the focal point of my practice, and I practice them every day. I've had a lot of tragedy in my life, with family members dying very prematurely and very young. And I will say that that practice I can relate to. It is embedded in my heart. I understand the motive of the Buddha for teaching that to his disciples, so that it would, with recitation, it would calm the seeds of fear inside of it. We all have those seeds of fear, but if you practice the 5 remembrances with devotion, with understanding, it will conquer a lot of that fear. That's all I can say. I wish everyone would practice them. They are short, they are very easy to memorize, and they go directly to your heart and mind, and they are a wonderful practice. And that's all I have to say. I know we're running short of time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Janet, this is Richard Z from Connecticut. Like Janet Real, this is a very heart practice for me. It's one I turn to often and formally. say the contemplations and reflect and contemplate on them. And you did such a beautiful job of bringing in examples from your own life. I'm truly inspired. And I just want to take a moment here. I'm aware that we're short on time as well. But to take a step back and just express my gratitude for this Dharma festival today. Suffice it to say, you collectively don't need me to remind you that the backdrop of our contemporary lives is 2 pandemics and an economic downturn. So we have a pandemic from a virus that has taken many lives and caused much suffering. We have a pandemic of racism that has been around for decades, but I think many people are looking more deeply at. Many people, over and above the health repercussions of the coronavirus, have experienced losses of jobs and income and worry about putting food on the table and the like. But perhaps not in spite of that, but because of that, I feel particularly moved by today's gathering. One of the beautiful things, many of us have an affinity for Thich Nhat Hanh and his writings. And so many of his books could almost be a teaching unto themselves. And one of my favorite books by Thich Nhat Hanh is called Being Peace. And the name of the very first chapter is Suffering is Not Enough. Suffering is not enough. And we're reminded to celebrate the little blessings in life along the way, as well as the big ones. And I'm sitting here thinking, in my many years in this Dharma teacher order, going right back to the beginning, it is very rare that one's given Sangha in a given state has 5 or 6 people who are finishing up a program at once. I see Fernando's head nodding and some of the other people that have been with the order as well. We have 5 people from Connecticut who have finished their 4th year of study this year in these trying times. And Jeff had agreed last year at this time, he had finished up the 4-year program as well. And Jeff has agreed to move toward ordination as a Dharma teacher. And many of the others who have finished more recently have expressed an interest in moving toward ordaining as teachers as well. And I just want to note explicitly what an auspicious occasion it is for so many beautiful practitioners and students to come of hit this milestone at once. Richard Downey brings humor and creativity to his teachings. Richard's an artist. For those of you that aren't with us regularly, as part of the Connecticut Sangha. And he's brought so many hands-on teachings that are outside the box and show that there are many skillful ways to teach. Craig, my dear, dear Dharma brother, I mean, is the embodiment of selfless service in this organization right now.
Yes.
He and Fernando and so many others from the New York Sangha in particular, who arrange things like this and keep them going. So Craig, thank you for your example of service. Tom is not the most vociferous member of our Sangha. He sort of a man of few words, but when Tom speaks, I am often moved because there's a lifetime. He mentioned his age today and his stage in life, but just whenever he shares his insights with us, there's a lifetime of embodied wisdom that Tom shares. And I'm so grateful for his presence in our Sangha. Jeff, I mean, today you saw an example of skillful means. He talked about how to balance his practice in terms of formal sitting, and how he used the Heart Sutra to throw light on the foundations of, on the mindfulness of breathing practice. And he does this every time we meet. He brings in skillful means in his teachings. And I'm so grateful that, Jeff, you accepted our invitation to move toward ordination as a teacher, because I think you're going to be a remarkably skilled, although humble teacher. Ted has a brilliant mind. For those of you that don't know this, Ted is a geneticist and a faculty member at the University of Connecticut. And despite the occupational hazards that come with a mind of, or a life of the mind in his professional work, he has a gift for cutting directly to the essence of the teachings in a simple, eloquent, understated way that I have come to so greatly appreciate. And then finally, Janet, who just shared so beautifully her reflections on the 5 remembrances, is an embodiment of loving kindness and compassion and listening deeply. Janet, every time I see your face or think of you, it lifts my spirits. So all of you in your own ways bring gifts to the DTO, and I'm so grateful that all of you have agreed to stick around, and that we will not be seeing the last of you. And then finally, I just want to close by saying thank you, Michelle, for your leadership this year. In Connecticut, we're blessed to have a deep bench. Bobby and Deborah and others, we rotate from year to year who's going to formally be the coordinator for the classes. In fact, I wrote to Fernando recently and said, we haven't even designated who's going to do it next year, but I have no worries because we work so well together. And but Michelle, thank you for taking the baton this year. So.
Thank you, Richard. Our sister Janet Crocker was the last person on our list of presenters, and I thank everyone for being here, for sharing the Dharma with all of us, for enriching our lives in so many ways. I know I have been nourished, I have been enriched, and I will cherish this moment because the Dharma Festival is always so deeply significant to me, and I know that it is so for others. I apologize for those who could not participate, who are 4th-year students or who would have been 4th-year students who could not participate. Unfortunately, the time was very, very limited. As you can see, we're way over the 12 o'clock mark, and we're still keeping you here. And I apologize for that, but I think the time has not been wasted, at least not for me. It hasn't been wasted. I appreciate Richard's remarks. They're wonderful for your Sanghas. I appreciate that Ruth and Peter and David from the Virginia Sangha are here. And we'll follow up with you in regards to your years of study with Fernando. And thank you, John, and thank you, Fab and Sylvia, for being here, for sharing the Dharma with us, and certainly thank you, Janet, for sharing with us. And now I'm gonna leave it to, thank you, Carl, coming from Germany.